Hello, my friends. This is Jake Coburn, and this is another episode of the Quarantine Sessions podcast, facilitated during the strange emergence of the novel coronavirus lockdown in the year 2020. And this week, I am speaking with Michael Stuart, who is an author, speaker, and producer, most notable for his book, The Ghost Dance, An Untold History of the Americas. Michael has spent about 30 years living with different tribes in the Amazon, primarily known for residing with the Yanomami people in the rainforest in the 1980s. And he has both survived and helped tribes survive many epidemics, and he has a really interesting perspective on the situation at hand currently and on the way epidemics work in general. He just has a really interesting view on life in general as a result of spending so much time unplugged from the kind of cultural matrix that we find ourselves so embedded within. And I loved this conversation. I thought it was really interesting, and I hope you enjoy it as well. And without further ado, here is Michael Stuart Annie. There we are.
Here we are.
There we go. Hey,
There we go.
Michael.
There we go. Hey, Jake, what's up?
How you doing?
Good, good, good. There's a little new technology for me, so it's a little tricky.
It's new for everybody, but it's a miracle, though.
Yes, it is. Can you
Yeah.
hear me pretty good?
I can hear you perfectly.
Great, great.
So where in the world are you tuning in from?
Right now, we're in Sebastopol, Northern California.
Awesome, cool. I grew up in Marin County, so I know all of Northern California pretty well. Sebastopol is beautiful.
Yeah,
Love it.
we're staying about 15 minutes from Sebastopol in Francis Huxley's old house.
Cool. Wow. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you today. I've been watching your videos for the last few weeks. They've been really interesting and really informative. It seems like you have quite a perspective on the situation that's informed by your history of being a jungle guide and spending time with native peoples, which is fascinating to me. I've spent a little bit of time. I spent time with the Shipibo and did an ayahuasca dieta about 2 years ago. And
In
that
Peru.
was kind of my only exposure to life in the jungle as a tribal community. But you've spent how many years working with native peoples and living in tribal communities?
I started at the end of the 60s, and then in 1987 until 2004, I fought epidemics among
Really? Oh
remote
wow.
tribes for a very long time. Like people talk, these things can go on for a really long time if you're not careful.
Yeah.
So so yeah, it's been about a half a century I've been doing it.
Wow. How did you get involved with that line of work?
Well, the line of work came later. It was how I got to live in the jungle, because when I went to live in the jungle, I had no line of work except existing in the jungle. When I was with the Yanomami in 1987, when the epidemics broke out, I was already there and had been there with them. So when they were in such a terrible position and I knew them very well, um, I really kind of got pulled in it. When the epidemics hit at first, I realized what a heavy situation it was. And I actually left and said, this is too much. But I
Hmm.
really just could not deal with it. So a few months later, I went back, and all of a sudden, 12 years later, I was still there.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's been a long way. And how I got to this whole thing, it's a very curious situation, because I really, it just kind of, it's the path my life kind of took. And I would say that the curious part was that I seem to have an aptitude to survive in the jungle and became a very good jungle survivalist. So it worked for me, after a while.
Wow. Yeah, fascinating. Do you see a lot of similarities with this epidemic situation
and what you experienced in the jungle with the native communities?
Yeah, some really strong similarities and some big differences. Of course, the biggest difference is, although they were in a very remote area and had no outside help until this started, they had no outside contact whatsoever, most of them, but they had a lot of more room to move. So when what we call social distancing, it was ironic to me that when this epidemic started, that all the technology that we were supposed to have, it seemed nobody was prepared whatsoever. And what they ended up doing was using a thousands of year old indigenous technique called Wyoming, which is basically like permaculture, indigenous things that we like to put English words on and kind of reappropriate them. But Wyoming is what the ritual of leaving the village, burning it during an epidemic, and then going out into the jungle and spreading out until the pathogen dies out. But they've got more open room to spread than we do. So that makes a big difference. And each pathogen has its own unique qualities to it. Corona has very particular qualities. Some we're just starting to find out. But the basic ABCs of dealing with an epidemic, it's been profound to me how much we have not followed the protocol. And I very much believe that this was not a big problem, and human error has made it a far bigger problem than it is. To put that in perspective, you got to remember when the plagues broke out in the times of Rome in Europe, the Black Plague, it was supposed to last. That kind of virus would normally die out in 3, 4, 5 years. Human error made it continue for 500.
Wow.
So, I'm much more worried in this case about the human error and what has caused this epidemic, because what caused the epidemic with the tribes in the jungle is exactly what caused this epidemic. Epidemics are part of nature. And when nature is too taxed by any parasite, the way Mother Nature deals with it is an epidemic. That epidemic could kill off locusts, it could kill off invasive beetles. We take it very personal because we're the parasite in this situation.
Yeah.
And I take it personal. So, yes, there are a lot of similarities and some differences.
Oh, wow. You said the ABCs of epidemics. What are those ABCs to you? For how would ideally, how do you think we should have approached the situation early on to reduce the spread?
Well, there are real authorities out there that knew how to do this. Larry Brilliant, Ron Blaine, the Ebola czar, um, Joe McCormick, and yet none of these people were called in to even help, which was a big mistake. Two is, it's like what I give advice to everybody now, and I gave this advice before this. When you feel a tickle in your throat or something, immediately my regiment is salt on ginger and using the antiviral in the ginger to get your throat. Typically, when things first enter your body, you have a good chance of getting them out of your body. If you hesitate at all, it's like finding an infestation in your garden in a plant. If you don't immediately isolate that plant and clean it up and go, oh, I've got stuff to do tomorrow. Oh, tomorrow I got school. The next day I got a date. Oh, I'll do it in 3 days. Your garden's gone, or you have hours of maintenance every day. What we needed to do is really jump on it immediately, like people were advising. And jump on it means this: we were led to believe that the reason people were doing testing is because it's really they care about us and they want to know who's sick. That's not why epidemiologists test. They test to make a pattern in a plan, to see through the test where the clusters are, where the hot zones are. So they're not just metaphorically spraying in outer space, hoping they hit these nanomicroscopic pathogens these viruses are. You got to go right to the spot and get it. And if we would have done that and jumped on it like a lot of the medical and the epidemiologists wanted to, not their fault, they're playing catch up, I doubt we'd be in the position we're in today.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a symptom of the culture that we are basically encouraged to just go, go, go. And if you're sick, to tough it out and still go to work or still go to school. And people also live this distance away from their bodies where even if they are becoming sick, they're not even present to be able to really feel that because they're on this treadmill and they're constantly distracted by all these things like the internet, television, whatever it is. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's it. That's it. And of course, once the situation was evolving, one of the problems I've had with it is I just happen, I'm not on the internet all that much. It's literally in the last year I've learned to use an iPhone. So, it's not my wheelhouse, so to speak. It just happened to be I got on the internet when the South Korean head of epidemiology there in English did a video, and he made it very clear that what he saw was the big difference between the Western world, the United States, Europe, and Canada, so to speak. And what they were doing was they wore masks and we did not.
Mm,
And I went, because sometimes masks work, but sometimes a mask can turn your face into a petri dish.
right.
You're scratching. So it's a tricky thing, and I'm not going to go. I believe when you get into it and you got leaders in a situation like this, if everybody says my way, we're in trouble. You got to go along with the team a bit, but you got to use common sense. And to me, the big fault was I believe he was purposely told to lie because there was something else going on in Asia that has come out in the last couple of days because actual real scientific experiments were done. And in the areas of China and South Korea where they worked with Western medicine or modern medicine, they also used botanical Chinese medicine. Um, there is a outstanding difference in the success they had. But
Wow.
the U.S. medical establishment is totally pushing drugs. Nothing else matters. Everybody pray for this vaccine that's going to come and save us. Bill Gates is going to find it and it's going to save the world. And then we'll all have to be vaccinated for everything and carry our passport vaccination. And I think this weakens the immune system of humanity and is not what should be done. I think I've been in epidemics where absolutely pharmaceuticals worked, and I've been in epidemics where pharmaceuticals did not work, right? And you got to use every tool you have. But we're being pushed a lot of agendas from a lot of different sides. When you mix politics with science, it always comes out bad.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I was impacted by your video where you're talking about the plant medicines that you found were effective in treating malaria. And that's something that I was really struck by when I spent time with the Shipibo, how they have this whole library of thousands of plants in the jungle that they've used to treat everything. And people have come to the jungle and been cured of what Western medicine would consider incurable diseases like Crohn's disorder, diabetes,
Absolutely.
um, all of these things that they have medicines for in a plant form. And I think it's very likely that there could be plants that could be used to treat this epidemic very effectively as well. So I'm curious to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, the Chinese have pretty much come out and said what you said is true already in the last couple of days, which is interesting. Um, I know, like I spoke about with the epidemics in the Yanomami in the Amazon, the chloroquine, which has become a big subject again, a drug that I took in half a century in and out of the jungle. I've taken chloroquine twice, and both times I was tricked into taking it. The second time I took it, I almost died of malaria. So
Wow.
it's a very tricky thing, and it's pretty much outdated, which is the interesting part about it too. So there's a large cachet of it somewhere that drug companies are looking to get rid of, and drug companies that politicians have their hands in the pockets of. So what's being said to us, I know is not all the facts, but I cannot comment on that because I don't specifically know the facts. I've not been in the mix of this, and I am not a licensed health officer. I'm a jungle guide, and so we saw with the Yanomami, we had millions of dollars in medicine given to us for all these philanthropist organizations that knew how poorly those medicines worked. We're talking 12 to 14% success rate for chloroquine at best. And we came in with Artemisia new, not a plant which is part of the Americas, but it does grow here. Now it's called Sweet Annie here. But interesting enough, that plant comes from the same region that many people believe malaria came from.
Mm.
So it became an extremely effective plant. We worked closely with the medicine people that had many of their own things to work with. They had a frog they used. They had
Was it Cambo?
no, a different
Okay.
frog. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
very different frog. And whoa, that would have been wild. And they had certain types of immature parts of papaya plants that they used. But the artemisia really seemed, it had an 87% success rate for us, and that's major. That's almost as good as it gets. So, yes, I have seen myself that we're being led down a particular path, and I don't think it's totally in our best interest, but we are in some deep doo-doo. And I don't want to tell people, go renegade, go anarchist, not in the least. We got to do our best, use our common sense, and we all got to get through this together.
Mm. Has your time spent with the native people like the Yanomami really influenced your perspectives on how to live life and what values you hold in general?
I'm a very strange monkey. It is so much, it's an odd thing because if I meet people, I look more or less like some variation of everybody else. But really, what's going on behind, you don't live with uncontacted tribes for very long, extended periods of time and not have a very different way to look at the world. One of the classic differences that we're facing in the Amazon fighting the epidemic now are most of the tribes we see on the internet involved with the conservancies and activist groups. They've been pretty modernized. They've lost much of their traditional aspects, but they need help and survive like everyone, and they are part of the people who we need to save the problem. So we're dealing with two different groups of people who have very different needs. Among the Yanomami or in the Javari, you can still call for Wyoming, their own practice that they understand to fight this epidemic. If they all went on Wyoming right now, they'd be safe. Yet the more westernized tribes, so to speak, they got soybean fields around them. They got nowhere to run. They don't remember these old techniques, so they need Western medicine and Western food for them to get through it. So what I learned with the tribes, what the defining difference to me was, if you need a new computer, you go to the store or go online and you get a computer, or you speak to a friend of yours who may technically know more and get advice. That's not what they do. The people of the old way, what they do is, let's say their bow broke. They don't go and make a bow because they may not be the best bow maker. They don't go running around who has a bow. They'll do their own ceremony and they'll appeal to, let's say, the Shapuri, the spirits, and they'll explain their situation. And they'll be walking down the path one day, a couple days later, with this new beautiful pot they made, and they'll run in, and I'll run into you, and I'll go, Jake, that's a beautiful bow. And you said, hey man, I just made it. I got my own bow. And you said, but boy, do I need a pot. Hey Jake, I got a pot right here. Now Westerners would say, happenstance, that's ridiculous. But the truth is, we've been convinced that this paradigm that we live in, that might makes right, and screw the other guy before he screws you, and all the stuff that no matter how many of us go against it, that is really the way our civilization is working right now.
Mm.
And that's not the way they work. Happenstance in that way of living happens so often. It's really astronomical. It proved to me that the concepts that I grew up with too, of the way to think here and the way things in the back of our head, oh, no matter what anybody says, this is just the way it is not the only way. And in fact, in history, it has not been the most successful way. And there have been other paradigms in history that have worked fantastic. And the way we are taught history totally blocks them out. There's a place in Peru called El Corral, and it's the oldest city, they say, in the Americas. And it was proven for over 800 years, I think 890 years or something like that. They never had war or violence there.
Mm.
The way they did that was the opposite of us. They did quality versus quantity. They were the first to develop irrigation and domesticate cotton. So they had a vision, probably with talking plants, possibly ayahuasca, people say.
I
And
think it was more cactus-based medicine. I think that they have carvings of San Pedro cactuses and things,
they do
possibly.
that, but I have to say, I have spent a lot of time there. The only real work I've seen with San Pedro has been with Westerners. I've
Yeah,
taken part and been in a lot of ceremonies. It could very well be in places I have not been, and I have not been to El Corral. But I've seen much more of that on the outside. I've never actually seen that at all within the cultures, to be honest.
interesting.
So I'm not sure about that. And in the legend, it was ayahuasca, and the spider, he could have taught a woman how to weave fish nets. So they made wonderful fish nets, brought them to the ocean. The fishermen went, wow, this is great. So instead of killing them and stealing the fish nets or driving down the quality by making junkier fish nets, the tribes protected them and said, these are great people to have on our side and friends. So they always protected them. And even up to modern times, there was a tribe in the jungle in Brazil, still is, called the Camayura, the Wari people, and they make the best pottery in the Amazon. And they're very strong people. They're particularly strong people. They never fought wars because all the people around them loved them and took care of them so much they never had to. So
Wow.
other paradigms, we've been locked into this, and the illusion has convinced us, even us who are on the outside looking in, we're still, even I, somewhere in me, I still have ways that I'm convinced of it. But through my time in the jungle and all, I've really had the time to break away from that type of thinking and put more of my attention into talking plants and literally learning from plants in the forest, as opposed
Mm.
what I'm doing now, books and internet.
Yeah. Yeah, what you're saying, it reminds me of the concept of synchronicity, how things just kind of arise naturally and there's this flow when we're in harmony with the way things are. And yeah, that's something that I've experienced a lot. It seems like when you're kind of on your purpose, the reality, it it kind of relaxes around that to allow for more space for you to kind of to have the essential connections for the next steps in your journey. And it seems like the native people live that way all the time, and that's more of our natural state of being.
And I think the coronavirus, for all its horror and pain it's caused people, like everything, it has different sides to it. I think it has slowed us down a bit. And I think actually people are more open right now to ideas than they were for many reasons, but partly because just what you say, it has just physically slowed down. I know in my personal case, I'm someone who's got to wake up in the morning and do lots of things. I'm very physical and do. And just the month and since I've been back trapped kind of from Mexico and been here, a lot of people have contacted me, and I've got, including yourself, that if I was normally running around like I typically was, I wouldn't even known you contacted me on the web. So I think that's very true. Just the slowing down, and I think we're in a time now where the coronavirus is tearing a lot of the veil of illusion and exposing. I mean, it surely exposed that, boy, for all our big talk and we're the greatest and we're the technology, boy, do I give a zero for the way we handled this epidemic. We had zero together, which is
Mm.
interesting. Why is that in this great moment we had to run back to a thousand-year old indigenous ritual, which we just renamed social distancing? And to me, the point in that is something that I am outspoken about. What I learned in the jungles is that there's all variations of tribes and they do it on different levels, but there is no doubt in my mind that it is the indigenous people that are on the very front line of this ecological environmental struggle we are in right now. And it's ecological. It is not the Chinese or a bat or a little cute armadillo guy or a snake that caused this. What caused this is environmental destruction and trauma to everything that lives in that environmental destruction, including us. That's what caused this epidemic. And it's the same thing, different epidemic, different variation, but it was gold miners and environmental destruction that caused it among the Yanomami. And right outside the city of Wuhan, you're in the mountains in the country, and they created from building that city. And I've been in China and I've been through these places. It's horrific. I'm not just pointing the finger at the Republicans or the Democrat or this or that. China's horrible. I mean, some of the most disgusting environmental stuff I ever seen in my life was in China. Although I love the Chinese people, I love Chinese food. I had a great time in China. So it's not them that I have a thing with. It's the truth is we're at a time in history where it's pretty obvious in general who rules the world are the spoiled brat, nasty, entitled kids of spoiled brat, nasty, entitled kids of that generations. And they're not our best. They're not our finest. They're not our most intelligent. They're actually basically the biggest jerks we got run the world. And not just one country. It's all over. It's rampant.
Mm.
And that needs to change because I assure you, this is a vanguard virus and it's going to open waves. And there's plenty of stuff why Bolsonaro's cutting down the Amazon. I've lived there. There's a lot of bush fever out there. There's a lot of hemorrhagic stuff. There's all kinds of pathogen and retro. There's all kinds of stuff out there. The jungle was never the lungs of the earth. That was just a cool new age word to come up that made people feel cozy on Earth Day so they can think they were saving the world when really all the plastic they were picking up was being shipped to Malaysia to ruin those people's country. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. And that's part of the wake up. The wake up is all over. There's not just one group. We all are waking up. The earth is under tremendous stress, and Mother Nature is saying to us now, what she's saying is, gee, I had a silent fart that you couldn't even smell. And look at the impact it's had. Imagine if I get pissed off. You kids need to clean up your room. And we're getting smacked in the face. And people like us, I think, are hearing her. There's a lot of people that aren't hearing her at all. But I assure you this, before this rodeo's over, we're all going to hear her because she's paying attention now.
Yeah, and she runs the show, not us.
The ball game, the show, the bats, the gloves, her deal.
Everything.
We're parasites invited into the stadium to drink beer,
Yeah, we're guests in the house, and I think that's important to remember.
Yeah.
You were talking in another video about how the jungle actually protects us against a lot of pathogens that could be released if there's environmental destruction. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, that's what I was saying with what I see the jungle of is not the lungs of the earth. Every tree everywhere you are, by the way, where I live, there are lots of trees. And just to make it clear, I've got where I live, there's San Pedro growing everywhere. So I'm not against it. I'm just making a point that in my travels, I never saw it. You know, and I
So
saw a lot
can
of
we
plants.
can we talk about that for just a second? So
Yeah.
you're saying that most of the tribal communities that you've been around, they don't actually use plant medicines as a big integrated part of their communities?
No, they all most of the tribal groups I'm with were very into plant medicines. As you follow the ghost dance, you find that the tribes that have really kept the old time religion alive very much did it through their plant medicines. You know, I
Okay.
mean, just in Mexico, which we know, the two regions that have the most intact tribes, the Huicholi and the
Mhm.
Mazatec in Oaxaca, the Huicholi have peyote and the Mazatec have the sacred mushroom. That's no
Mhm.
accident. So, no, I'm not saying that I can talk
Okay.
that I've had a lot of experience with plant medicine. I'm talking about San Pedro in particular. I've
Oh,
never
okay.
taken in a ritual with tribes.
Mm.
You know, in my
Yeah, there seems to
travels,
be
if I've been
a
in the Middle
large
East,
tourist. Yeah, there seems to be a large tourist industry around that. Like when I spent time in the Sacred Valley in Peru, there were a lot of people that were guiding hikes through the Andean mountains with San Pedro and stuff like that. And they kind of they sell it as a traditional ceremony, but I'm not so sure of the legitimacy of that.
this is the point. In fact, the toad from the Sonora Desert, which is now, you know, Tozat, never met a traditional person ever that took that. That's
Right.
that probably started a couple years ago, if that. Um, the use of, if you go to Huautla de Jimenez, the world-known capital of the sacred mushroom, the mushroom they eat in
Right.
Huautla now, none of the native people ate in the day, and still don't. That mushroom is called the white man's saint mushroom, the San Isidro, the cubensis, and it's sold to tourists because it grows in abundance. The sacred mushrooms, the dishes, never grew in abundance and never could be marketed. So the people Walt, literally what Walt people says it means eagle nest, but people who live there, Waltland means the place of commerce, right? And they're very good at commerce in that town relatively to the other people. So they marketed very well. So what I'm pointing out is people go around to different communities and even San Francisco people, which I know and all, and they're told these are the real ceremonies. And I'm an outsider. I'm not a Shipibo. And I got in a little riff with this on the net. Some very good people put up a post and said, these two women are some of the greatest curanderas in the Amazon. Here they are making the sacred medicine. And I look at the picture and they're making it in a big aluminum pot. And in my era, if a medicine person showed up with an aluminum pot, they would kill him. Seriously. That would be such a travesty. So
Mm.
people look at them and go, well, they're indigenous and they wear some indigenous clothes, but there's different levels to it. The Shipibo, in fact, have been culturally, both the Shuar and the Shipibo have been culturally transformed for hundreds of years already. They're, even when I knew the Shipibo 50 years ago, they were nothing like they are today, right? So
Mm.
people change, all people change, even naked people in the deepest part of the jungle. You know, I've joked and people said to me, oh, you lived in the time of the Old West. I said, no, I lived in 10,000 BC. There were dinosaurs, you know, there were
Mhm.
24-foot black crocodiles out there. It was dinosaur time. Um, and giant anacondas and things. So even those people, even a naked tribesman still uncontacted, you're not exactly the same as a naked tribesman 10,000 years ago. You have gone through your evolution. These people are very smart. There's no dumb people in the Amazon. If you're in the Amazon and you're dumb, you're dead. You got to be very smart to get through a day of life out there. So it's interesting how our culture, and I very much support. You know, for me, I took LSD the first time in 1965 when it was legal, and
Wow.
I don't know if I would have gone on this journey without that. I mean, it shattered my web in reality, to say the least, right? And I know everyone has to go through their version of how they do that. But there's a confusion in the psychedelic community, which I'm trying to help clarify, which is that there's three things going on at the same time. The people at Johns Hopkins and Stanford Place are doing fantastic research only using synthesized psilocybin right now, or synthesized ayahuasca, because legally they can't do these experiments. It's not their fault. It's the government, the laws, the situation, right? Even though they know that when you do the actual plant, it's a very different experience, right? But what
Mm-hmm.
they're purposely studying traumas of modern civilization, trauma, sleep deprivation, fear of death, neurosis. They're helping us with those chemicals, and people who could never get to the plants. They're helping these people start to come this direction, start to come to a peace with themselves, which is extremely important. I in no way, this is a great moment going on. But if you're going to say to me, I'm taking these chemicals and I'm doing made up rituals or laying on a couch with ambiance, I will say to you, I assure you, you're not going down the path to communicate with nature. And what I mean by communicate with nature, it is the great Achilles heel of civilization. We are so far from communicating with nature. Pre-Toltec people had a way better understanding of the patterns of nature and how to work with them and make them work. Us in a civilization means, because you're sitting still, you can't move around, you're not nomadic. You need not only the sun and the rain and the wind to come, but if they don't come in the right order, you have a drought, a flood, you have mayhem. So nature has to do that. And we need for civilization to continue to relearn how to communicate with the elements of nature. Now they say we have TV news people, and I laugh because the weather people on the news are usually wrong. You could probably bet against, you could, bet the soft side and win with them a lot. So I'm not that convinced that the information they're giving these talking heads who just look like they know something has any validity at all. We have testing the barometric. I always joke, I could take a piece of cloth and wet it and hang it on a stick outside and get the exact same readings they get. If it stays damp, it's going to rain. If it dries up, it's going to be dry. And if it's blowing, it's coming, It's kind of very basic stuff. So if you want to learn the path of communicating with nature, reestablishing that, then you have to work with talking plants, real plants, and you have to know which plants there are. In the jungle, I've walked past thousands of ayahuasca vines that people have said, no, not that one, that's not right. I don't know, I know more than a dozen types of ayahuasca vines. So when people say ayahuasca, I don't even know what they're talking about. And to those people, if it's not grown in the wild, if it's not wild and free and it's grown in a garden, it doesn't have a spirit animal, and they don't believe it has a ghost or a buhi or a norishi or any of those things. It's like a food. It's something you consume. So while, as yourself and people may have had really eye-opening experience and taking you on this path, I'm saying that path is way further, and it's very difficult to get to those people. It's almost impossible to get to them in their rituals. And so that's the kind of reason why guys like me are still alive, because I kind of had that great gift to live through the last days of the wild and free. And I can come to Canada or the United States and get a passport. People ask me, well, bring the real people from the jungle. Well, the real people from the jungle don't speak any language you know. They don't have clothes. They don't have shoes. They don't have a passport. If they got in front of a bunch of white people, they'd fall apart completely and they'd have nothing to say anyway. So what happens is people run down there in a week or two. They discover someone who they can mold for their monetary or whatever reasons. These people always speak one of the Western languages, Portuguese or Spanish, and the odds are 9 out of 10 they learned that in the mission system, so they're not the remote tribal people. They don't represent them at all. And they let them grow their hair and put a little makeup or a headdress on, which they never wear except on the internet. And they go, ooh, this person's a shaman. Well, you know, and I todo mundo todo bem, you know, I mean, but they're not. They're not the thing I'm talking about. And I do believe people, as yourself and others, can follow that path and would start on a psychedelic and maybe move to mushrooms and ayahuasca. But you have to be aware what happening at Johns Hopkins is science dealing with modern trauma and modern problems. Going to festivals and getting loaded with people is not tribal. It's enjoying yourself with the festival, getting loaded. That's what it is. Nothing wrong with that. But they come and go, oh, yeah, this is just like you would try. No, it has nothing to do with it whatsoever. It's like 180 degrees. And then the other side is really getting into indigenous communities, really getting to people like me who have the credentials, who really put in the time there. And sadly, most of the guys I know are dead already. I know less than a handful of guys from the old days and ladies that are still alive. Just age has taken them out, most of them. So that window's really shrinking. And I think there's a lot of us, and possibly you, that are much more interested in communing with nature and understanding our weather and how not to have a storm of pandemics for the next 50 years, because that's what's coming if we don't wake up. And and so, you know, that's the confusion, and that's what I'm hoping a bit to straighten out and bring some outside way of thinking to the psychedelic community.
Yeah, I think that what Johns Hopkins is doing is they're trying to fix a problem that is a symptom of the system. So they're trying to, you know, change the paradigm from within the same paradigm, but you need to construct a new paradigm because this paradigm isn't working.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Jake. That's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Yeah. And it seems like the way that the tribal people have built their societies, they're much happier. I remember when I even you saying the Shipibo have changed a lot when I was there and was able to communicate with them, because they do speak, you know, Spanish and things like that. They said that they had within their own communities never seen these kinds of Western problems like depression and anxiety and you know, all the mental illness that Western people have, and the disconnection from nature, the disconnection from source and spirit, that most people are going to the jungle to take these medicines to try to reconcile. And they seemed, as a whole in their communities, a lot happier and a lot more at peace and a lot more connected than we are in the West. Would you say that that's your experience also? Is that most of the native people are much happier?
100%. And, you know, we live partly down in Oaxaca, and I've been there that's where I started out. So I've been there for over a half a century. And we have many friends there who, when I met them a half a century ago, they were basically almost naked in the forest. And now they got TVs, right? And they've changed a lot. But I'll tell you, part of the reason I adore Oaxaca is they've kept about. They are a happier, way poorer, but they're much happier and more content in general than the people are here. I know the Shipibo. The Shipibo by nature are fairly sweet people, right? They're a warm people in general. That's why I think people have come to them. It was their warmth. And I have nothing against the Shipibo doing what they're doing. And I think they really are opening up a lot of people's eyes. In fact, I support it. I'm just saying to people, understand that if you really love the guitar and learning to play, you may be really good in your high school band, but you're not Jimi Hendrix yet. You know what I mean? You know, we kind of carried away with ourselves, you know. You know, there's a long ride to get to Jimmy, you know. You know, so
yeah, totally.
that, yeah.
What do you think are ideas or principles that you've learned with groups in the jungle that we could take and integrate into our lives and into the society that we're in now to make us more connected with nature, to make us more sustainable, to make us happier and healthier overall?
Great question. I'll start with the number one thing. I have found the indigenous people of the jungle that I know are laughomaniacs. They love to laugh. They love to tickle their kids and throw them in the air and make their kids go woo, and everybody laugh. They just, even when you hurt yourself, I mean, people picture these people as so perfect in the forest that nothing happens. Oh, I've known many naked tribal people go, oh, my foot's sore. I don't want to walk on the path anymore. They was like, suck it up, cowboy. I mean, they're us. It's not like they're this, even animals. I've seen monkeys make a great tree leap from one tree to another and miss and hit the tree and kill themselves. It's not perfect. They're super good at it, the people, the animals, but they're not perfect. The other thing in them that is very interesting is they love to touch a lot. They touch their kids, their animals, their pets, and they're pet crazy too. Sometimes you'll see more wild animals as pets in a village than you'll see in the jungle. And I think children and people who live around non-farm animals, but farm animals too, live around animals, you learn a lot of lessons from animals. We learn how to behave from the animals. So when we live in a world where we have no contact with real animals, we've lost we've learned a great part of our learning. The other thing that I find so interesting about them is that they're like us, naked in every way. Their truth is naked, their violence is naked, their love is naked. And I'm not telling people to go out and get naked because that's not my mission in life, but I think if we drop a little bit of all our guards, get a little more naked, I think it would let us breathe better. That was one of the things I learned from them. I mean, one of the funniest parts that goes the other way is that, I was in a village and there was a guy from National Geographic there. And he said, it's so fascinating how they're all naked and they're just at peace with nudity like that. I said, that's because you don't understand these people. See those teenagers over there? They got some nasty laughing thing to say about that person's body. They're teenagers. You know what I mean? They're just, sitting there. We'd go hunting in the jungle, and I don't know how many times I'd say to the guys, okay already. I've heard all your stories and your desires. Just let's pay attention. Oh, no, 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 no. We saw this girl. She was amazing. Oh, God, this is 2 hours of this. Calm down, guys. So, they're us. They're not these miracle cures. They got plenty of their own problems. I would say in their culture, the biggest Achilles heel fault is people who live communally and live in that way, they bicker like crazy. I don't know if you have brothers and sisters that you bickered with, but boy, they can take bickering. They're like Joe Pesci. They can take bickering to a whole other level, these people. The bickering drive you nuts, they're bickering, So they've got it, they're perfect. But there is a deep warmth in them, this incredible warmth, I think is what you felt too. And I think actually a lot of people who go to the Amazon and go to the Shipibo or the Shuar or these different places and do it, I think part of the ceremony is just being around those people, because I know when I do ritual, I start the ceremony of my ritual at least a month before I actually perform the ritual. I got to slow down. I got to get my body right. I got to line up with the plants. I got to get to a place that the plants will even come to me. There's this whole thing I got to get to where it's kind of out there. And as it starts to focus in, all that happenstance and stuff just starts bubbling the last moment, and it gets magical. So you're really in that mindset even before the experience. And I would say the biggest thing, and not the biggest, but a really big thing, the two main things is they, who said it recently, Roni, they are not about the environment. They are the environment. And we have been convinced we're not. We're outsiders, we're removed, we're so upset with ourselves, we're so ridden with guilt. We are every bit part of nature as everything else in nature. We may be screwing up in nature, like a a weasel that goes into a hen house and kills all the hens and doesn't eat them. Nature screws up, right? But we are very much part of nature, and I think they taught me how much part of nature I was, because there are aspects of me in farming and all that I've done it most of my life. But after I was with the tribes, I was a different kind of farmer. I could just walk through a field, and if there was one troubled plant among thousands, my body, that it would lead me right to that plant. And
Wow.
I'm not the only one. I know that's a phenomenon of that. So I think they have a great deal to teach. I think they've been trying to teach us now for 500 years. Remember, they were the ones who said, no, you got to respect the earth. You can't foul it. And we said, you're a bunch of stupid tree hugger Indians. We're making money and we're raping the land and we're raping your women and we got everything and Mother Nature ain't stopping us. Our God says whoever gets the most toys win. That's our God. So, you Indians are dopey. You're just primitive, dumb people. Well, today, don't it seem like they were right all along and we were just going so fast we could not even see what was going down? And the whole time they've been trying to go, hey, people, we all live on this planet. Look, we know stuff. And I think we're finally coming to that time where, through all of their years of suffering and the tremendous burden and struggle these people have been put through, if I want to see the positive in everything, I'd say life has carved them into exactly what life needs, the true keepers of this planet. And that's who they are.
Mhm.
They don't have the least important job. They are the people with the number. In the United States, they pay school teachers junk. They're the ones
Mhm.
teaching our kids. Why are you paying school teachers and firemen junk? Those people need to get paid well. They keep us going. It's that same thing. We've tried to invent this whole story of their worthlessness, and they're the greatest worth we have on the planet right now. I believe they're the only ones who can bring the earth. John Fire Lame Deer, who sent me on the Lakota Sage on the Ghost Dance Path, said to me once, you know, I don't believe politicians or the scientists that they pay to make their lies sound true will ever get human beings out of the problem, the two-legged, out of the problems we've got ourselves in. Only the ghost dance can do that. But somehow us Indian people, his term, um, we lost the steps. And that's how I got on my path. That's actually what sent me, where was that leap of faith from when I was another kid in the United States and all of a sudden I was a kid in the jungle? That was the moment with John Lame Deer that did that. He really was the one who set me on my path to find the steps of the ghost dance. And I believe it's taken me 50 something years. I'm not the quickest squirrel in the herd, but I actually believe we found the steps.
Wow. Beautiful. We have about 5 minutes left. Do you want to tell us a bit about your book, The Ghost
Yeah,
Dance?
absolutely. Thank you so much for that. My book's called The Ghost Dance, An Untold History of the Americas. Although I've been published, I purposely put this book out not to be in that publishing system. Although I'm learning now that Amazon has its own thing going on that's not really me either, but that's where I am. And you can find my book there on Amazon. And what I think right now is fascinating, and people I know who've read it have very much picked up on, is wrote that book over many years and finished it a couple years ago. And 10, 15 years ago, I wrote the part about what's happening in the Amazon and the epidemics. And I said, before the earthquakes and everything, it's going to be the epidemics and the first thing that's going to come. Because Dishitu, who is the primary spirit in the book, who is my ally, who I speak with, um, typically medicine people have one plant. They don't do lots of different plants. That's once again a Western phenomenon. I do my ceremonies with Dishitu 3 times a year. And unless someone's sick or there's a very special situation or a ghost dance, I never do it any other times. I just don't do it at all. I feel that if you do it too much, you dissipate it. You don't get more, you go backwards. You've got to do it and learn from that, gather all those pieces. And that's another thing to end with. And this, my book's a lot about this too. My book follows the actual ghost dance from pre-Columbian time, from an image in the Codex Borgia, one of the 17 last codexes that survived the Inquisition in the New World out of tens of thousands of books, and the image of Lord the Plumed Serpent ghost dancing with the ghost of the dead. And that was the beginning of the ceremony and the birth of corn and the birth of Dishi too, also the sacred mushroom. And it radiated out from those mountains right there, the mountains of the clouds, and didn't come from the Bering Straits. It came north, south, and east and west with corn. And the oldest corn kernels in the world were found in the Sierra Mazateca. And I believe that this ritual, the ghost dance, was created by the ancients, aware, as is stated in the codexes, that they believe the fifth world, the other worlds ended by fire and storm. They say this world, if it ends, will end by human destruction. And I believe that dance is a dance that will pull the tribes together so they'll be unified instead of divide and conquered, where they will really have some power to help us all. And that's the heart of the book.
Mm, wow. Somebody asked, can the ghosts talk to you?
Excuse me?
Somebody wrote a comment. They asked, can the ghosts talk to you?
To me?
Yeah.
Well, partly what started me out, when I was a kid, I spoke to ghosts when I was little, and they never told me anything bad. They basically told me, I was a little kid, 5, 6-year-old kid, and when they asked you, are you going to be a doctor, a policeman? I said, I am a witch doctor, and I will be a witch doctor at 5 years.
Wow.
So they talked to me. I told people, and then right away they thought I was mentally ill and put me with psychiatrists and this and that from the school because I was poor. And I was quick enough in that situation to realize, just to go, oh, I grew out of that. I don't talk to them anymore. Okay, he's fine, next. But I didn't. So yes, and what I very much believe is through the plants, I absolutely do commune with ancestors.
All right. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I hope this podcast brought nourishment to your soul and mind and heart and spirit. And if you'd like to hear more, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to my SoundCloud account. And if you're listening to this in the future, when I have these uploaded to various podcasting platforms, please subscribe to those as well. And woohoo, we made it. I did it. I found out a way to get these all up there. And if you want to see these conversations live, make sure to follow me on Instagram. I am Cobrin on Instagram. And I am doing 3 or 4 of these conversations live per week with a lot of amazing people. So you get to see the conversations not only happen in the immediate space of when they're occurring, but you get to see them several weeks in advance from when I am posting these to listen to afterwards. So please check that out. I have all the info to find more from this week's esteemed guests and follow my Instagram account to see who is upcoming on the perennial lineup of inspired speakers, thinkers, and artists. So thank you again for listening. Blessings to you wherever you may be in the world. I hope that you are safe. I hope that you are staying sane in these crazy times. Much love. This is Jake Cobrin with the Quarantine Sessions podcast. Until next time.